I'm Robbie Daziel, Chief Innovation Officer at Lectric eBikes. Beside me, I have Joe Gray of Gray Design, who helped us design the XP4. And then joining us live is our engineer, Blake Jensen, who did the engineering behind the XP4. So really excited to have these two guys with me today. You know, with the XP4, we knew we wanted to really level up the design of the bike, right? It's not something that we had a real laser focus on until this XP4 project. And so, you know, we were kind of asking ourselves, well, how do you design a bike? What is industrial design? How do you go from, you know, having an awesome engineering team and product team to incorporating some of this creative, you know, design philosophy? And that's when we tapped our network and got in contact with Joe from Gray Design. And, you know, Joe really, you know, was able to take all of these conversations we were having about what is the Lectric brand, how do we embody that in a physical product, and we took that from idea to the XP4. So
yeah, it was cool to come in at that point in time in Lectric's history, I think, because like you'd seen a bunch of success and made a lot of really good actual design decisions on bikes up until that point. But you weren't at the point before that where you could do an entire bike. And like everything you just said is like sort of like what we talked about at the beginning of the project. It was like, let's embody the brand in the object itself. And so it was a lot of learning about the brand on my part, and then helping the team sort of put a focus on where we wanted to go and what we wanted to communicate. It took a bit of like synthesis and kind of going like, okay, what do we what's really the most important thing? And I think the feeling of freedom when you ride a bike is the feeling that you want to sort of communicate with the bike itself, because that's just like the benefit that everybody gets and takes with them long term. When we were sitting in your office one day, I think like, I don't know if people know this, but there's like a test loop that people take from the retail, and like you can sit in Robbie's office and watch people like rip around, and maybe it's their first time riding an e-bike, and you can see that like, you know, ear to ear grin and experience that they're having. So like that's the feeling you sort of want to hint at by looking at a bike. And if you can get there through designing, you know, purposeful shapes, then you've been successful.
I think that's a really interesting thing you said there, because, you know, when we first came in the industry, you know, there were many more brands than there even are today. Yeah. You know, so I think there's, you know, a lot of, you know, sameness that goes on out there with designs of e-bikes. And so a lot of people, I think, would, you know, without seeing the logos or the colors or the branding on the XP3 or some of our other bikes, you know, would go, oh, this feels super similar to, you know, this other folding bike, right? And we really wanted to get away from that and get, you know, really differentiate and get away from the competition and say, hey, you know what, this is something that's very uniquely Lectric that represents, you know, who we want to be as a brand. And, you know, hopefully that comes through. And, you know, we were talking earlier, we got to go read all the comments and make sure that people are digging it. But yeah,
I think like being confident and sticking with it and making sure that, you know, if you glue that really good design to that really good service and you do that consistently, I mean, that's a powerful thing.
Joe is, we told Joe, we want you to be as creative as possible and really explore the options. And then we'll hand this off to the engineering team and they'll tell us, okay, here's what I think I can really execute on. And here's some areas where we might have issues. So Blake, I don't know if, you know, you can dive in with your perspective, you know, being handed this concept direction and some sketches and stuff, and, you know, having to go to the drawing board and put this into reality.
I think fortunately for us, it's not just a handoff. There's always a conversation. Like we were continually having conversations with Joe as well as within Lectric as a whole. It's not just a handoff. It's never just it's not a toss over the wall. It's like I said, it's a collaboration. So you know, Joe laid out a great visual brand language document, kind of giving a template or inspiration for what the whole Lectric lineup could look like. And so we take that as a group and discuss, hey, what do we want to try first? You know, it's not, even at that stage, it's not, you don't really know what is and is not possible, or whether or not you'll like the way that it looks when you translate that inspiration into a design that can be even prototype. At this stage, you know, early on, you're not even talking about making the production bike. You're thinking about, okay, what do we need to learn? what do we need to prove at this stage in the process in order to decide what the final direction is going to be. And so there's a lot of experimentation with different tube shapes, different layouts, both trying to match that visual brand language, that inspiration that Joe laid out, as well as fit within, as well as trying to work out what is everybody inside the building on the product team, engineering team, leadership team. Are we getting to a product that everybody feels confident about, or at least that we're learning something about in the early stages, as well as are we addressing, any existing things that customers don't like. We're talking to the customer service crew, we're talking to warranty, we're talking to quality. We're trying to make sure that if there's something that we can improve in the end customer's experience through the design itself, that we're taking that into account. And again, just trying to prove that out early on in the process.
Yeah, and I think, you talk about the iteration and, what are we learning along the way. I think we thought this was going to go one way at the beginning of the project, and then, learned pretty quickly with that first sample, the second sample, that it was going to go a different direction. I don't know if you could share maybe some of your experience, Blake, but like that first sample we got had a different battery on the bike. And a bolt-on rear rack. And so I don't know if you want to talk about, from an engineering perspective, some of the testing we did and some of the learnings we took from those early prototypes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a great point, bringing up the early prototypes. We know how we want the end product to feel. We want it to feel seamless. We want to get the customer on the bike and enjoying the ride, having a good time, not worrying about any aspect of the bike itself. And so we know where we want to get in the end, but we're not sure how we're gonna walk the path to get there, or what that path is to get there. So when we first started, our thought was we're gonna have a totally separate bolt-on rear rack, more similar to what we have on our other bikes, and it looked kind of totally different from what the finished product ended up looking like. And the battery tube was totally different, and a bunch of the other tubes were completely different. Some of that is just part of the prototyping process. The tubes that are on the XP4 for Lectric, none of those tubes existed before we started production on XP4, before we started the tooling that would eventually become the production bike on XP4. So you're trying to learn lessons about what the final product will be, but using existing tubes to lay out frame shapes, frame measurements, geometries, and take away those learning lessons. One of the big ones was we learned pretty early on that we needed to go to the welded on rack that's so familiar to customers who have the XP3, just to be able to get the strength and stiffness that we had built into the XP3 and carry that over to the XP4. So that was a huge departure from where we started out. We thought we would go in a totally different direction. And the battery and the battery tube was also, we started out in one direction, using a more off-the-shelf battery, using something that was in existence, because it saves a lot of money, and it can save a lot of time. But ultimately, when we got down the road of making those prototypes and evaluating them, it became pretty clear that we were going to have to push things a little bit more in our own direction, both in terms of giving the aesthetic appearance and feeling that Joe was talking about earlier, but also in terms of having the strength that we needed the bike to have, the stiffness that we needed the bike to have, as well as just improving the customer experience. One of the things that Levi brought up in the launch presentation was we changed the key position, which is a big deal for a lot of our customers.
So this is probably one of the biggest upgrades of the bike, been demanded since we made the very first one. New key location. So, all right. I knew that makes some people happy.
We're constantly thinking about how can we make the customer experience better. We have the bikes that are out there. Our customers love them. We love them. But it's our job to look at them more critically. It's our job to say, there's that one thing on that bike, and if only we could change that, it would be so much better for us and for the customer. And we're constantly getting that feedback.
Yeah, well, I didn't get to tell you yesterday, Blake, but hopefully you got to see, I didn't see the final project until last week or whatever. And it was just such a delight to see. I think I said I almost fell off my chair when I was on that call with Christy, just because of how well executed it was, and how clearly all of those little negotiations have been navigated like a professionally. Like, I don't know, like beyond what you can usually imagine. It doesn't happen that way usually.
There's a culture at Lectric where people are able to talk cross-department, up and down, the structure, up and down the corporate structure, and bring things up about, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I noticed this one thing. And all of those things build to a point where we can take all that information. We're not just doing it while we're working on a project. All of that information and knowledge and opinion is being kind of constantly percolated throughout the company. And so when the opportunity comes up, when we have the ability to make a new bike, all of that information is, it's not ready to go, but we've been able to think about it and marinate on it for a period of time. So we're confident, at least sometimes most importantly, about some things we don't want to do. We're also really confident about the things we do want to do. And to get to that final product, we also have some great factory partners who are able to make that magic happen. We're asking for a lot out of the bike, out of the tubing. We're making custom parts that we have tight timelines for, and we're able to, again, work collaboratively to make those things happen. And that, I think, is one of the best parts. It's part of the magic of working at Lectric, which is just wonderful.
Yeah, I think the company presentation, where Levi got up there with just an incredible amount of energy, I think, that was awesome to see, the conclusion of all of this hard work, the pinnacle of all of the hard work, getting to announce that, to the public, see the reaction online. And yeah, man, it's just so exciting, really excited to get people riding these things, excited to keep, designing bikes with this new visual brand language. Hopefully people are digging the new direction, and yeah, stoked for the future.